Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Wilkinson, Manager of Communications and Media with Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency. Today, the SPSA will provide a technical overview of the wildfires in the province. Please note we're recording this call, and the recording will be posted to the SPSA social and YouTube channels later today. Joining us online today to provide an update is the Honorable Tim McLeod, Minister of Corrections, Policing, and Public Safety, and SPSA's Vice President of Operations, Steve Roberts. We also have SPSA's President and Fire Commissioner, Marlo Pritchard, available to answer any questions. We do have a hard stop at 2 p.m. to ask members of the media to ask one question, and please keep it to one question when you are called upon. If we have time remaining in the meeting, we'll go to follow-ups, but we do have a hard stop at 2 p.m. With that, I will turn it over to Minister McLeod for our first update.
Well, thank you very much, Stephanie, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll just start with a few brief comments, and then I'll turn things over to Marlo Pritchard for a more technical update. To just point out that, once again, over the weekend, we're seeing more rain and more positive weather, which is helping tremendously with the forest fire situation across the province. We're very pleased to see a significant reduction in the number of active fires, and that allows more of our communities to repatriate. We have currently, my understanding is 34 communities that are either in the process of repatriating or will be very soon. And we certainly hope to see that trend continue as these families are able to return to their homes and to their communities, understanding very much that some of those communities will be returning to a very different situation than they left. Specifically, Minister Schmaltz and I were able to tour some of the communities that were touched by the fires late last week, and our thoughts and prayers certainly go out to the families that are impacted by those forest fires, and we want to make sure that they know that we are here as a government to support them through both the evacuation process and through the repatriation, and we will continue to assist in whatever way is necessary as they work towards the rebuilding of their communities. It was a very powerful experience to fly over specifically the community of Denair Beach, which suffered the most significant losses. And I want to acknowledge those the losses of property and homes and businesses in that community, but at the same time, I want to express our huge thanks to the frontline staff, the firefighters, the volunteers, and the community members who were able to successfully protect large numbers of properties in other communities and save a lot of the properties in that community. So again, as always, our thanks go out to the frontline firefighters and volunteers and community members who have worked tirelessly in the face of significant danger to make sure that our communities can be protected to the greatest extent possible. And without a doubt, they have saved lives. Finally, before I turn things back over to Marlo Pritchard, I would like to just touch on the government's commitment for an additional $500 of financial support for our community members who have been evacuated from their primary residence. Last week, Minister Schmaltz and I sent a letter to all of the community leaders indicating that financial commitment will be made available to them. We are working together collaboratively with them to make sure that we can identify all of the members of their respective communities that qualify for that payment so that we don't miss anyone. And through the assistance of the SPSA, we'll make sure that those funds are delivered to the community members as quickly as possible. And with that, I think Mr. Pritchard, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll actually go to Vice President of Operations, Steve Roberts, for our technical update.
Good afternoon. As mentioned, the rain and precipitation across the province, cooler weather has significantly helped the fire situation. We currently only have 13 active wildfires on the landscape today. Following that, also further good news is both the Pelican 2 fire and the Ditch fire are now officially listed as contained, in other words, not expected to spread beyond current boundaries. And work continues on our other significant fires at this time, including some of the larger fires using both internal resources, Type 3 firefighters, contractors, and resources we have brought in from other locations. The weather has also provided enough reprieve that we will be rescinding the fire ban for the remainder portion of the province at 1700 today. So we believe we have enough precipitation and lower hazards across the province that there will no longer be a fire ban after 1700 today. No significant changes to the 4 major fires. The Shoe Fire, still not contained. The J. Smith Fire, the Pisu Fire by L'Orange, and the Wolf Fire by Denair Beach. No significant movement on those fires, but lots and lots of activity by folks hoping to achieve containment and security on those large fires while we have the favorable weather, so that we do not expect to see these continue, knowing that at some point this summer it is going to warm up again. And based on the other favorable answers, we only have 4 highways that are impacted by wildfires right now for closures: 912, 927, 106, and 167. Minister and had gone out and viewed some of our areas or communities that have been impacted. We have finished our assessments in the East Trout Lake area, and the majority of assessments in the Denair Beach area. So currently we have confirmed structure loss of over 350 structures, plus equipment, including things like quads, boats, that kind of equipment. By tomorrow, we hope to have the numbers of structures that have been damaged and other pieces of value that were damaged for Denair. So currently we are seeing and still expect to see a structure loss exceeding 500. That's the summary to note. I will probably leave more time for questions from the group.
Thanks, Steve. I'll actually now pass it over to SPSA's President and Fire Commissioner Marlo Pritchard for a few words. Marlo?
Thanks, Steph. Just was going to quickly just update individuals on the evacuation and repatriation efforts. As the minister said, we are well underway with our repatriation of communities. We know that there's probably approximately 10,000 individuals that have returned home or in the process of returning home. We have 5 communities that are still under evacuation order, and that's Creighton, Denair Beach, East Trout Lake, Whalen Bay, and the P1s and P2 are priority 1s and priority 2 individuals from Cumberland House. SPSA currently is, working with or supporting 175 evacuees, and we know that there are others that are self-evacuated that have not returned home. I can say that in just a little bit of a follow-up to the minister's comment about the letters that were sent out to those communities, so we don't miss anybody. SPSA is in the process and has been in the process this morning and will continue throughout the day of reaching into those communities and speaking to administrators on how best to roll that $500 into the community as quickly as possible. So we'll continue to work on that throughout the day. And with that, Stephanie, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Marlo. So now we'll open it up to questions. So remind you, 1 question and no follow-ups unless there's time at the end. So could I have Nicole please ask your question and provide your media outlet? Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Nicole Healy here with Global News. The NDP sharing today that they found out that a water bomber that was recently purchased by the Saskatchewan government arrived on May 30th and has not been operational because no one is trained to fly it. From my understanding, the plane was supposed to be used this season, but when I spoke to an aircraft specialist today, I heard it could take 60 to 90 days to hire and train pilots, depending on if the government has already started that. So I'm wondering if why there may be a little bit of miscommunication there about whether or not the aircraft will be available this season. Wondering if the government has started the hiring process for this aircraft, for hiring pilots, and why it may not have been proactive to do that before the plane arrived, so could have been available this season.
Thanks very much for the question, Nicole. And yeah, I learned about the comments made by the NDP earlier this morning, and it is unfortunate that even during a state of emergency, they're still wanting to politicize tragedy. This is not a situation where we had resources that were available that were left on the table, or in this case, left on the tarmac. This government has made a significant investment to add 4 additional aircraft to our fleet of forest fighting equipment. The first of those planes did arrive after we had already declared a state of emergency on or about, my understanding is May 30th. The reality of the situation is we were already in a state of emergency. The pilots that had been training to operate that plane, and I will let Marlo speak a little more in detail about the operational side of this, had received all of the simulator training that they could up until that time, but to comply with Transport Canada regulations, the requirement is that they would train on that particular aircraft, and the operational decision was made not to remove those 4 pilots from active duty fighting fires, protecting our communities, so that they could train on the new plane, but rather to continue protecting our communities and saving lives. And so, Marlo, I'll let you touch on the operational decision and some of the details that went into that, but it is fully our expectation that plane, once our pilots are able to train on it and comply with the Transport Canada regulations, that plane will be added to the fleet and will be available this forest firefighting season. But again, our government is focused on saving lives and protecting communities. And when we are in a state of provincial emergency, doing that is our priority. Marlo?
Thanks, Minister. Just to echo what the Minister said, it was an
So sorry
operational
to
necessity.
interrupt. Are we able to get your camera on, Marlo?
I'm actually on the road. Stand by. That okay?
Yes,
Thanks,
thanks.
Marlo.
Okay. No, as the Minister said, these were operational necessities and operational decisions that, to take pilots off of operational rotation would reduce or impact our missions. In addition, what we did is we brought in and we capitalized on our compacts, and we brought in Q400s from out of province. We brought in water bombers from out of province, from BC as well. So we really did, enhance our capabilities and capacities, and did not have a negative impact because of the Q400 sitting on the tarmac, as you said. The safety of our pilots and the safety of our crews and alignment with the Transport Canada rules required us to pivot and change to really round our focus on the operational necessities at that time. So, Steve, did I miss anything?
Just the piece that there was a question about hiring pilots. The government's plan is, as we will be retiring the 580 aircraft as soon as the Q400s are operational, we are actually training our own pilots to take over those duties. So they have already received ground schooling and simulator training, but they will be required to do more training, as much as 24 hours, 25 hours of actual stick time in the air and more, before they are considered operationally certified under Transport Canada rules. So again, we will be using our own, and we had envisioned at the time in April that it wouldn't be operational, that we'd be using the spring to allow some of those pilots to take some training. Obviously, our fire situation did not allow that. We needed to keep operational aircraft in the air operational to do their work. That means keeping mechanics with those aircraft to keep them flying every day they're needed. So yes, that's put us slightly behind of where we thought. But at some point, when we have the opportunity, we will be continuing our training exercises on that first aircraft with as many pilots as we can, knowing that we will be receiving a second aircraft next year and that we want them to be air ready.
Thank you. Up next, we'll go to Jason.
Hi, thank you very much for taking our questions today. This is for either Steve or Marlo, whichever wants to take it. I know you said you're still counting structures in Dinar Beach, and I know that you guys, there's a lot that's not in your control when it comes to fighting wildfires, but as you look at what happened there, what do you think could be done differently in the future to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again there?
Well, there are some measures that, again, we can take. Mother Nature was not helping us there, so I'll be fairly honest, is that there may be situations that are beyond our capacity. I mean, fires that are traveling at, pushed by winds in 50, 60 kilometers an hour, head, rank 6, which means they're running across the treetops. There is not a person on the ground, a bulldozer available, an air tanker that can slow those fires down. You see that behavior. You've seen it in California. You've seen it on some of the BC wildfires. There will be wildfires that cannot be wrestled to the ground. Our hope is to avoid those at all costs, get them early as our initial TAC program does. But again, we hope to be successful 100% of the time. We have to manage where we can. And we have to look at our forest communities, because there's the other side of the equation, is people who live and reside around the forest have to expect that somewhere at some time they could have a fire encroachment. So is their community fire safe and ready? Is their fire department trained to manage those? Are their houses built of materials that will resist those ember storms we saw in Dinar Beach? So there's a number of exercises we can take, but I think, could we collectively do more? Yes, we can.
Thank you, Steve. Jeremy, please provide your media outlet.
Hi there. Yeah, Jeremy Symes with the Canadian Press. I understand what you're saying about the pilots. They were in the middle of training with this new plane, but obviously had to pivot because there was more pressing needs there. Can you just explain, though, why the province just couldn't bring in other pilots who had this training with this specific plane and use that plane to fight the fires?
So I can address that. Right now, everybody who's certified to fly one of those aircraft in a firefighting role is flying that aircraft in a firefighting role. That's the bottom line, is these are not generic positions. These are specialized positions on a specialized aircraft type. They can't be hired off the street. In many cases, they have to be trained by agencies. So even for us to get to that stage, we have to bring in a training pilot for a number of weeks to coach our individuals through flying this aircraft in missions that are not common. There are lots and lots of pilots that can fly the Q400 for commercial purposes, but are unable and wouldn't be qualified to fly them in a firefighting situation. They just don't have the skills and training to do such an endeavor. So it's not as easy as just, bring somebody who can drive a Datsun or a Toyota and put them in front of an 18-wheel truck. There are different levels of training, different specialties that need to be understood. You're flying a fast aircraft at near stall speed in a turbulent airspace above an active fire. That is not normal. And requires very specific trained individuals, and they exist, but they work for companies who are currently, like Alaska, is using them. And that's why we board those aircraft with their pilots from Alaska to come assist us.
Thank you, Steve. Up next, Sarah.
Hi there. Just wondering if you might be able to note, I know SPSA previously had mentioned that the timber industry was put on pause. I guess I'm just hoping to get an update on what some of those industries look like right now. Are there supports going out to areas like the forestry and timber industry currently maybe are on hold?
There'll be an assessment process. They were only on hold because of the fire ban. The fire ban itself restricts the amount of activity they can do. So as soon as the fire ban's removed, in areas that are not directly impacted by fire right now, they can resume normal operations. Where those operations were impacted by a fire, they'll have to assess, again, what that might mean for their logging operations or their hauling operations. And we'll be working with the forest industry to get them in to look at their sites as soon as we can, so they can go back to work if they're able to, or make alternate plans for work and for harvesting if they can't do that.
And up next, Jillian from 980 CGME.
Hi. I'm just wondering if you could maybe tell me where we're at with that request that went in for the base camps and the tents with the federal government. Do you know if it's been approved or when it's arriving? I know we have lots of crews heading into mop-up communities.
I can speak to that, Steve.
Sure, I'll just mention the crews. All of our crews, we have 3 large camps that we own. So all of the firefighting crews right now in La Ronge, around the shoe fire, around the ditch fire, are being supported through infrastructure by us. The camps mentioned by Marlo, of course, previously were related to areas like Denair, Creighton, Flin Flon, where we're going to need more support staff than just firefighters. So I'll turn it over to Marlo.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, no, we're still working with the federal government. The offer is there. It is in the POC, and we'll be looking at it. What I understand is that most of these are third party through the federal government, and we're trying to determine what the actual need will be in regards to the size of the camps. But there is an opportunity for us in the near future to set them up in the areas of need. So we continuously work with our federal partners through the Provincial Emergency Operations Center and Public Safety Canada to activate this process, but we're not there today.
Thank you, Steve and Marlo. Up next, Chris.
Yeah, Steve, follow up on the water bomber issue. So if we're talking about how all of these pilots are working, you can't bring in extra ones, does that mean that we need to be training and hiring more in Saskatchewan as we see these wildfire situations ramp up more and more?
Well, I'd say that, I mean, the concern this year, of course, is moving pilots from one aircraft type, the 580, to basically their new aircraft type, which is going to be bigger and faster. So not only are we getting 4 new aircraft for 4 old aircraft, they travel faster, they have more retardant, so they can do more. So the piece we have to deal with right now is we have to get pilots from one air platform to another. And whether we expect it or not, the fire season so far in Saskatchewan has prevented us from doing that. If it had been an average season or a slow start season, that training probably would have already been completed. So for instance, we already had a training pilot lined up to come to La Ronge and train those pilots. We canceled that because all the pilots were actually water bombing fires at this time. So we'll reschedule that probably into July here as we get restarted and continue on with our training plan.
Up next, Charlotte.
Yes, Charlotte Marshall from Radio Canada. Following up on the water bomber situation, we've seen other provinces like in British Columbia turning to private companies to fill the gaps when it comes to aircraft and pilots. Here, the province has invested in those 4 new aircrafts, but is the government also considering that recruiting in private companies as a short-term solution when facing these kind of shortages?
So I can answer that. One of the avenues, we left no stone unturned. We actually went to those private vendors that fly those aircraft types to see if they could lend us pilots. And they did not have any spare pilots to lend Saskatchewan. They were all operating an actual aircraft. So nobody has a bunch of these pilots looking for work. They're all gainfully employed operating one of these aircraft. So Yes, we did. We looked at other provincial vendors who operate this aircraft, but also private companies that manage this aircraft and fly it to see if they could help us, and they were unable to. So we did look at all avenues.
Thanks, Steve. Jeremy?
Hi there, yeah, Jeremy here again with the Canadian Press. Is it true that this aircraft had to be physically pushed to prevent it from being damaged by the fires, this new aircraft that was not used?
We moved all of the aircraft in L'Orange to the central part, and technically it's not a light aircraft. It would have been towed into place with what's called a tug, which would tow it to wherever it is. When aircraft are on the ground without their engines running, they are towed to their location with specialized aircraft. So we moved a number of aircraft that weren't in operations to the central part of the field to avoid any impact as the fire neared L'Orange in the early stages of that fire.
Thanks, Steve. Shane, you're up next. Shane, you might be on mute. Okay. We will move on. You can always type your question in the chat. We will move to Chris.
All right, want to follow up again on the staffing and the training for this water bomber. So you say how it was scheduled for the spring, now it's being moved to July. Is there no opportunity that you could have had to train these pilots on this type of aircraft in the off season where there's not a chance for wildfires in Saskatchewan, like say training them down in the States or wherever? Is there not that opportunity?
There was not to do live aircraft training. We did do all our simulator training in advance. It was done in February and March. We sent our pilots to a full range simulator to get all their training, but they need actual light behind the aircraft. These are specialized, they're not everywhere. And other vendors who had these aircraft were putting them through their annual maintenance. So they weren't available just to get on short-term loan to practice flying. The full intent was to get our first aircraft and start using that to train and certify our pilots. And then when that was completed, to put it into operations late this season.
Thanks, Steve. So Shane put his question in the chat. You talked about Denair Beach and how they lost 300 structures. Is there plans to help people with housing there as they look to rebuild their lives?
I can speak to that really quick, Stephanie. We're definitely moving into the recovery phase. We will be working with our government partners, social services, and community leaders to help those that need to be supported when they return to a community and find that their residence has been destroyed. So we will be working with those affected over the coming weeks. And probably in all fairness over the coming months as we go through a rebuilding phase.
Thanks, Marlo. Up next, Jillian.
Hi, I'm just wondering, because you guys have contained the ditch and the Pelican fire, are you guys close to containing other big fires, maybe like the Shoe or Peace fire? Why or why not?
Well, containment continues on all of our fires. They just happen to be ones where there was some of the guard was easier to contain. For instance, in the Pelican fire, half of that fire was pressed up against the lake. So really there wasn't a containment spread issue on that side. So again, they had other areas, they had other big fires that had happened in the last 15, 20 years where the fire went to that area and stopped moving. Those are far easier to contain than a fire that stops in the middle of fully mature forest where you have to get in. There's lots of fuel, lots of work going to take to contain that. Work has been going on in the Shoe fire, focused on the west side, on the Candle Lake side, to contain that portion first, as well as in the north section. They're working on containment around those small communities like Wayland Bay, Pipperel, and East Trout Lake to continue that, so it's when people go back, they're not going to see like smokes and fires immediately around their community. So Containment is continuing. We're not picking one fire and containing it, moving to the next. It's happening in all of the big fires here, and you'll see more over time reach that containment status.
Thanks, Steve. And our final question will go to Chris for a follow-up.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to follow up on Danair Beach, and Marlo, if you're answering this, if you could please turn your camera on. I just want to clarify the number of structures lost here. Is it 300 structures in Danair Beach, or is that 350 that are confirmed province-wide? And how many of those are homes versus pieces of equipment like cars, ATVs, that sort of thing?
So I can actually handle that question. I've got the stats in front of me now. The number I gave you first was the values outside of Danair Beach was 350, and that included all values. If we look at, for instance, East Trout Lake, there's a combination of houses, sheds, snowmobiles, quads, boat trailers. Everything is inventoried, everything is counted. So that 350 was all of the values we're aware of outside of Danair Beach. And we would expect that there will be hundreds others still in Danair Beach to come. And we're hoping to have those numbers within the next day or so as the crews move from one end to the other, inventorying every one of the values that were burnt by the fire. And
Steve, out of the confirmed values, can you break down between homes and other values?
Well, not in province-wide yet because we don't have Danair, but I'll give you an example. If we look at East Trout Lake, 58 of those were structures, homes, and out of 312. The other rest of them are anything from a shed to a trailer to a quad to a camper, a snowmobile. Anything that's stored there that was damaged and by the fire has to be inventoried. So those will include if you left your extra car parked in front and it was burnt and it's an SGI claim, it still would be inventoried as part of the losses to fire.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, everyone. That concludes today's media availability. Have a safe rest of your day, everyone.